Hello and welcome everybody to this week's edition of the International Cannabis Conversation on TRICHOMES.com and powered by the Global Cannabis Network Collective. I'm your host, Chris Day, and this week I have the great pleasure of having my friend, CEO of CannabiSalud, Lorena Beltran, on to talk about some huge movements really in Mexico. Lorena, welcome to the show. So glad to have you.
Thank you, Chris. My pleasure. Thank you so much for the invitation.
Yeah, of course. I know it's been tough to schedule things this week because you've been so busy with all of the new movements. Back in December, we were looking at some possible legislation passing, and it didn't quite happen. Pretty sure it will here in the near future. But I think the passage this week of a framework for medicinal cannabis across the entire country of Mexico probably caught some people by surprise because December got so much headline work, and this one just sort of snuck up on folks. So maybe tell everybody what passed, what actually happened in Mexico City this week.
Sure. Yeah, as you mentioned, it's being a pretty busy week, and we weren't really expecting this to happen just because we already used to, our legislators and our institutions just to keep pushing the deadlines and the final date where we finally see something happening. And we knew that the deadline for the publishment of this regulation was January 12th. But again, you never know, right? When you're in Mexico. So it was definitely a surprise, but a really good one. And what we see is a regulation of the law that passed since 2017. So now you're understanding, what I'm saying.
It's been a while.
When it comes to times here in Mexico. It's been a while, almost 4 years since this law for medical cannabis passed. And what this law allows us is to have import and export of medical cannabis products, as well as cultivation for research, clinical purposes, of course, and to develop pharmaceutical products and herbal medicine. Those are the only categories allowed under medical cannabis here in Mexico. What does this mean? We already know what a pharmaceutical is, and then we have a category of herbal medicine. We also have herbal remedies, but herbal medicine means that you also need clinical trials behind these products in order to have them on the market. And once they're on the market, you need a prescription from doctors to get them. So it's a lot like Brazil, the medical cannabis law in Brazil. It's like many places in the European Union where it's strictly pharmaceutical, right? So we're not going to see products that are regulated by COFEPRIS or like the US FDA right away on the market. We need to do these studies behind the products. We need the doctors to understand what these products are in order for them to prescribe them. And then you go with your prescription to the pharmacies or the drugstores to get them. So that's going to take a while still, but at the end of the day, we celebrate this regulation just because it opens the door, to start something, to start doing research on the plant that we weren't able to do before. And by having a federal law, that also opens many opportunities that we haven't seen in other markets, like in the United States, for example, or even in Canada or Uruguay, where they have federal laws, but the clinical research is way too expensive. It requires a big investment in order to do it. And Mexico, it's an opportunity to come and do that because everybody knows Mexico has lower prices. It doesn't compare to what a clinical trial costs in the United States. So that's a good thing. There's an opportunity for Mexico to explore research and science behind this plan that we don't even know half of their components, right?
Yeah, and it seems like knowing a little bit about the conference that you've hosted every year, CannabiSalud, and that focus on the medicinal aspects of the plant. It seems like particularly good news for the audiences you've been talking about. How do you think the reception will be as this evolves, as the research comes into fruition with the physicians, the doctors that are going to need to prescribe? Is there going to need to be a big push to get them on board, or is there a fairly substantive group of physicians already ready to go?
Well, I think there's a need for more education and more tools and resources for health professionals. But definitely, CannabiSalud has done a really good job in informing the doctors since 2017 about the future of medical cannabis, and we see that future now. It's here now, right? So definitely, the interest is growing, and by having a federal law, that like puts pressure on the health professionals, the doctors, because now they're going to see more patients, more people coming to them asking for these type of products. Because again, people already approve medical cannabis in Mexico. We're very conservative, very religious, and all these aspects around stigmatizing the plant. But now that it's completely legal and regulated, you're going to see a lot of patients coming out of the closet as well. And finally be brave enough to ask their doctors to help them with this type of products because they already heard on the news that's helping for this and that, epilepsy, all these conditions. So of course the doctors are just opening up to learn about this. Many of them because there's a personal desire to learn, others because there's pressure from their patients. So either way, it's great to see more health professionals coming to our platforms, CannabiSalud through social media and asking all these questions. Where can I get information? Where can I get certified? How can I get my prescription book certified to write down CBD, THC? So we, through CannabiSalud, we're helping, guide them and finding what they need. And CannabiSalud being an annual event, this 2021 is just going to be a very important year for us to present and to show all the evidence out there so they don't feel they're starting from zero in Mexico, because a lot of them think that there's not a lot of studies around medical cannabis. And we know there are many of them. So it's exciting times for Mexico, for CannabiSalud, of course, and definitely there's a lot to do still because again, this regulation only allows the pharmaceutical industry to start the studies, even for growers who are thinking this is a great opportunity for them to jump in the legal industry. There are a lot of requirements for the growers as well because there's only permission to do pharmaceuticals and herbal medicine. The grower has to have a relationship, a contract with pharmaceutical labs in order to sell the oils, right? The raw materials, if we want to call it like that, the isolates, the distillates. So it's super restrictive, in terms of like really starting the whole industry and have an economic impact that we want to see. There's still a fight or an effort that we still have to do in order to open up this law a little bit more so we can allow dietary supplements. So there are cosmetics on the market, there are food and beverages with cannabinoids. We still have to see that happening. And we know that's going to happen soon too, because we have this regulation of the law of 2017, but there's another proposed bill that it's being discussed right now. It was approved in the Senate, and now we are discussing this at the Chamber of Deputies, the lower house. So they're discussing this starting in February, and they have a deadline to April 30th to vote on this proposed bill, which will open up the recreational market and the industrial hemp market. So we're
Right.
super
And
excited
that's the
about
one
that.
that Well, that's the one we were talking about that was being looked at in December, right? And now has been pushed forward a little bit more. I think what I'm hearing is that this is a great stair step. It's a great entree. It creates some wonderful opportunities for research in Mexico, and certainly the labs and the scientific capability is absolutely there at lower costs. I also hope, personally, being based in the U.S. but covering the world, that it puts some additional pressure on the U.S. to consider, opening up at least the medicinal cannabis at the federal level. As you look at sort of how these two bills dovetail together and the research, where do you think the first sort of strides in medicinal cannabis research are going to be focused on? Do you, if you know, I have no idea, so I'd sort of be speculating on things like epilepsy or autism. But what do you think is most prominent in the Mexican market?
In the Mexican market, because you have to look at the main conditions that are prevalent in Mexicans in our society. And we are number one in diabetes and obesity, unfortunately. So of course there you have doctors and scientists looking at those conditions, to be treated with cannabis. And we already know there's evidence on diabetes, there's evidence on obesity, there's evidence on many other conditions, but those are the main conditions right now on Mexicans. So of course we're going to see a lot of research protocols towards those conditions. I've talked to different pharmaceutical labs that are doing studies on fibromyalgia, on that they have protocols on endometriosis, a lot of conditions that attack women, for example. So I think the opportunities are huge, for research, because we already know that not even 1/3 of the cannabinoids have been studied. So I think Mexico, it's going to be on the threshold. Oh, sorry, I forgot that word, how to pronounce it. But in front of the line, the studies, and definitely trying to work together with Israel. I've seen a lot of scientists trying to contact people in Israel and already having these relationships, because we know they're already advanced in certain phases of the clinical studies that we can just bring to Mexico and continue from there, right? So it's looking pretty interesting. The only thing that it's really unfortunate is the patients won't have access to products right away. They won't have access to regulated quality products because we still need this research done. It can take at least 2 years for herbal medicine. Pharmaceuticals, you're talking about more than 5 years, depending on the type of study. So there's no real access to products right now. And the patients and the families of patients are really concerned about this because they thought they were going to get these products right away. So I know there are certain groups working with the government in order to find a way to help these patients right away. We have a big crisis for medical treatments for cancer, for children mainly. So they are trying to create these projects or paths in order to help the children that need products right away. How can we help them right now? And they're looking at the relation in Brazil. I keep going back to it because it's very similar. They have a medical cannabis law, and because they also require clinical research, but they were able to open up this path for patients to get products right away. It doesn't matter if they don't have studies behind them, but at least they have doctors that can help them, guide them with products that are already on maybe the gray market or that are more considered a dietary supplement. But the thing is that they need to have access, right? That's why we're moving these regulations forward. That's why these things are happening, thanks to them, because they were the ones that pushed for the regulation because they need it right away. So there's a lot of work to do still, Chris, but definitely this is the in the right direction.
So, Lorena, what I'm hearing through all of this, again, is that we've got a lot of work to do still. That there's some great opportunities with the medicinal research, but there's going to be a delay from certainly for patients in terms of being able to actually impact their lives. And hopefully all of that can be ramped up when you have both programs working in tandem as the new legislation comes in later in the spring or early summer. But just as we close, I wanted to see when you're talking about new business opportunities. I think sometimes people think, hey, now that this passed, I can come down, I can open up a dispensary, I can just put my product on the shelf. What types of licensing and requirements are people going to need to pursue in order to really participate actively? And where should they be looking for partners to help support the growth of the space?
Sure. We don't have a different type of licenses for this matter, just because this is being regulated under our normal health law that we already have. So pretty much they're treating cannabinoids as just another pharmaceutical component, as another medical component. So they're not special licenses for this. You have to do the same process you will do to introduce any other type of pharmaceutical, even without cannabis. So what you only need to do is make sure you comply with the requirements of COFEPRIS as any other pharmaceutical, as I mentioned. And the only license you need is a pharmaceutical lab license. That you have access to a pharmaceutical lab in order to prove that the product you're going to put on the market, it's good for X, Y, or Z condition. But when you're talking about the new proposed bill, yes, for recreational purposes, yes, they're developing different type of licenses for that. There's going to be a cultivation license. There's going to be a manufacturing license. There's going to be a commercialization license, import, export, and research license for recreational purposes. For hemp, industrial hemp, we're trying to just move it out of this equation. So industrial hemp doesn't need all these licenses and strict requirements in order to get a permit to grow a plant that it's non-psychoactive, that can be grown just as you will be growing corn, right? But yeah, right now the business opportunities around this regulation goes for those interested in doing research and developing pharmaceutical medical products that have this evidence that works for a specific condition such as cancer or epilepsy, which is a great opportunity as well. As I mentioned, the costs for do this type of development are way lower than any other country. And that doesn't mean that it's going to be less quality or not. It's not going to be a good job behind it just because it's cheaper. No. That's on the opposite. Our regulations are so strict, even more strict than the FDA. Our regulations are as strict as the European Union regulations around medical products. So it's just a great opportunity for science and research, and those companies focus on that.
That's great. A couple of weeks ago, I did a podcast, which people can find on TRICHOMES.com, about the European markets and regulations. Your description of how people are moving forward in the medicinal research space and really focused on, those ailments and areas where cannabis can really help Mexicans reminded me very much of a discussion I had with Abhishek Mohan a couple weeks ago on how he was approaching the Indian market. So it's really nice to see this consistency around the globe of, regulations, companies, people working together to help really positively impact people's lives. So as we close out, Lorena, how can people find you and follow sort of your ongoing updates, which I'm always happy to see and learn from?
Yeah, thank you, Chris. You can find me on CannabiSalud social media platforms, which is Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, of course. And we are coming up with amazing webinars. We have a live pretty soon. You can connect to any of our social media platforms to learn more about these dates for webinars and conversations around regulation in Mexico. You can find me on my personal social media, which is pretty public, on Lorena Beltran, either on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. And also, I want to mention that there is also an opening right now in Mexico for personal grows, just to have your own plants at home. That's another one the thing that I forgot. There's a jurisdiction that happened in 2018. So right now, as we speak, we are able to get permits to have a certain amount of plants at home. That's it. That's for personal consumption, not commercialization. But definitely we're going to see this opening before April 30th. And I think that's when the full benefits of the plan, the whole industry is going to open up for Mexico. And what we're trying to do by implementing modifications in the regulation is to really benefit Mexicans. That's an important thing to know, even for investors, which everybody is welcome, to come and do business and bring their investments into Mexico. But understand that the regulation, even dictated by our new government, is towards helping Mexicans first, help our communities, help our indigenous communities and small farmers, because there's a huge need, for them right now. We all owe them an apology for all this time of prohibition, and they were the ones that have been suffering for this. And now that it's opening the market, we have to make sure, the priority is to help them first.
Well, thanks so much. That's a great note to end on. And again, I look forward to doing this again in a couple of months as we see how this continues to evolve. And we'll talk to you soon. Thanks so much, Lorena. And thanks everybody out there in the audience. Please don't forget to subscribe.